The San Francisco fog clung stubbornly to the city, mirroring the persistent dread in Marcus Thorne's chest. He stared out his 22nd floor office window, the view obscured, just like the truth in most of his cases. At 42, Marcus was a powerhouse. In corporate defense, known for his ruthless efficiency and ice-cold detachment. He dismantled plaintiffs for breakfast, his victories celebrated in hushed, expensive tones. But the win column felt hollow lately, a monument to avarice he'd helped build brick by cynical brick. A knock shattered the quiet. "Mr. Thorne, your 10 o'clock is here. Ethan Reed?" His assistant, Helen, peered in, her expression carefully neutral. "Send him in, Helen." Marcus smoothed his already immaculate tie, steeling himself. Another disgruntled employee, another wrongful termination suit, likely fueled by incompetence masquerading as injustice. Routine. The door opened, and Ethan Reed stepped inside. Marcus's carefully constructed professional shield didn't crack, but something inside him stuttered. Ethan wasn't what he expected. Late 20s, maybe, with eyes the color of storm-tossed sea glass, currently wide with anxiety. He wore worn but clean jeans and a simple gray sweater that did little to hide the lean strength of someone who worked with his hands. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run nervous fingers through it repeatedly. He looked vulnerable. Genuine, a stark contrast to the polished sharks Marcus usually circled. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for seeing me." Ethan's voice was quiet, rough-edged with nerves, but held an underlying steadiness. "Mr. Reed, please, sit." Marcus gestured to the chair opposite his imposing mahogany desk. He slid a legal pad closer, a habitual barrier. "Helen mentioned a wrongful termination? From..." He glanced at the sparse file Helen had managed to compile. "Baytech Engineering?" Ethan sank into the chair, clutching a worn manila envelope. "Yes, 6 weeks ago, after 5 years." He took a shaky breath. "They said downsizing, budget cuts, but it wasn't true. They fired me because I'm gay." Marcus kept his expression impassive, though a flicker of irritation sparked. He'd heard variations of this claim countless times, often flimsy. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Reed. Do you have evidence? Emails? Witnesses?" Ethan opened the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a termination letter, stark and formal. Beneath the standard corporate language, someone had scrawled in blue pen, "Company culture fit issues." "That's the only copy they gave me," Ethan said, his voice tight. "But it wasn't there when I signed the initial HR paperwork. Someone added it later. And..." He pulled out a small stack of performance reviews. "Exceeds expectations. Every year. Until my manager found out about my boyfriend, Leo." Marcus picked up the termination letter, studying the handwritten note. It was crude, unprofessional. His cynical lawyer brain noted it could be faked. But looking at Ethan's raw, earnest face, the tremor in his hands as he laid out stellar reviews, doubt stirred. "Tell me exactly what happened. When did your manager find out?" Ethan recounted a company picnic 6 months prior. Leo had stopped by briefly, a seemingly innocuous interaction witnessed by his manager, Carl Riggs. "After that," Ethan said, his voice dropping, "everything changed. Nitpicking, impossible deadlines, public humiliation in team meetings, tasks taken away. Then, the budget cuts. I was the only one in my entire department let go." Marcus listened, truly listened, for the first time in months. He saw the exhaustion etched around Ethan's eyes, the faint tremor in his lip he tried to control. He saw the mechanic's calluses on his hands. He saw the quiet dignity battling profound hurt. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the violation, the erasure. "And your colleagues?" Marcus asked, his tone softer than he intended. Witnesses to the change in treatment? Some saw it, Ethan admitted, looking down at his hands. But Baytech pays well. People are scared. Riggs implied things about me being a distraction. He finally met Marcus's gaze, his sea-glass eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I need help, Mr. Thorne. They took my livelihood. They made me feel worthless for just existing. The raw pain in those words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent years building walls against empathy, viewing it as professional weakness. Yet, looking at Ethan Reed, feeling the weight of his unjust burden, a fissure appeared in Marcus's icy facade. He saw not just a client, but a man whose fundamental right to dignity had been trampled. He leaned forward slightly, the habitual barrier of the desk suddenly feeling vast and inappropriate. "Call me Marcus," he found himself saying, surprising them both. He pulled a tissue box from a drawer and nudged it subtly towards Ethan. "And don't believe them for a second, Ethan. You are not worthless." Ethan blinked, a single tear escaping and tracking down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away, a flush rising on his neck. "Sorry, I haven't really talked about it. Not like this." "Don't apologize," Marcus said firmly, his usual courtroom command softened by an unfamiliar warmth. "This is exactly where you should talk about it." He picked up the termination letter again. "This handwritten note? It's sloppy, arrogant. That could be our way in. We need to dig. Hard. Emails, server logs showing when that note was added, any witnesses brave enough to come forward. It won't be easy. Baytech has deep pockets and sharp lawyers." Ethan nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I need someone to believe me." Marcus held his gaze. The cynical lawyer warred with the man who remembered why he'd entered law in the first place, a naive dream of justice. Looking into Ethan's earnest, hurting eyes, the cynic faltered. "I believe you, Ethan," Marcus said, the words resonating with a conviction that startled him. "And I'll stand with you." The simple declaration hung in the air. Ethan's breath hitched, relief washing over his features, momentarily erasing the lines of stress. He offered a tentative, breathtaking smile. "Thank you, Marcus. You have no idea what that means." Marcus managed a small, genuine smile in return, the first that hadn't felt like a professional maneuver in years. As Ethan gathered his papers, their fingers brushed accidentally over the tissue box. A spark, minuscule but undeniable, jolted through Marcus. He pulled his hand back as if scalded. Ethan stood, clutching his envelope. "What? What happens next?" "I'll have Helen draw up the retainer agreement," Marcus said, forcing his voice back to businesslike, though his pulse still thrummed strangely. "Standard contingency. We win, I get a percentage. We lose, you owe me nothing but gratitude for trying." He attempted a light tone, but it fell flat. "Then we start digging. I know a very discreet private investigator." Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on Marcus for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Okay. Thank you again. Truly." He turned and walked out, the quiet click of the door echoing in the suddenly too large office. Marcus slumped back in his chair, staring at the closed door. The fog outside seemed to have seeped into his mind. He'd taken the case driven by a spark of indignation he'd thought long extinguished. But that wasn't all. The pull he felt towards Ethan Reed, the desire to protect, to soothe, to see him smile again, was terrifyingly unfamiliar. It was profoundly unprofessional, dangerous. Yet, looking at the termination letter with its cruel, handwritten slur, Marcus knew he couldn't walk away. He picked up the phone, dialing his investigator. "Ben, Marcus Thorne, I need you on something. Urgent. Client name, Ethan Reed. Former employer, Baytech Engineering. Dig deep. Start with a manager named Carl Riggs. And find me everything. Everything. He paused, the image of Ethan's tear-streaked face flashing in his mind. This one matters, Ben. More than most. Hanging up, Marcus ran a hand over his face. He'd just agreed to fight Goliath for a mechanic who walked into his office and cracked open a door in his heart he'd welded shut years ago. The weight of Ethan Reed's case file felt heavier than any billion-dollar contract, and infinitely more perilous. The battle against Baytech had begun, but Marcus suddenly realized the fiercest fight might be the one raging within himself. The rain lashed against Marcus's office window 3 days later, a relentless drumming that matched the frustration churning inside him. Ben, his investigator, was thorough, but Baytech's walls were high. Riggs had covered his tracks well. Server logs for the termination letter? Conveniently corrupted. Emails hinting at bias? Deleted, with plausible deniability. The colleagues Ethan mentioned? Clammed up tighter than oysters, fear of Riggs, and Baytech's retaliation, a palpable force. Marcus tossed Ben's preliminary report onto his desk, the flimsy weight of it mocking the gravity of Ethan's situation. Need more time, Marcus. Riggs is careful, digging into his personal life now, see if anything shakes loose. Time was a luxury Ethan didn't have. Marcus had seen the subtle tremor in Ethan's hand during their initial meeting, a sign of financial strain tightening its grip. He needed air, or caffeine, preferably both. Shrugging on his overcoat, he dismissed Helen's offer to fetch coffee. The walk through the rain-slicked financial district streets might clear his head. He ended up at The Grind, a small, steamy cafe tucked between imposing glass towers, known for its strong espresso and surprisingly good pastries. It was a place of anonymity, a stark contrast to the power lunch spots he usually frequented. Pushing, opened the door. The warm scent of roasted beans and cinnamon washed over him. He ordered a double espresso, his gaze automatically scanning the cramped space. And there, tucked into a corner booth beside a rain-streaked window, sat Ethan Reed. He looked different. Less tense, yet somehow more exposed. He wore the same gray sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. His head was bent over a large sketchbook, a charcoal pencil moving with focused intensity across the page. Raindrops traced paths down the window beside him, casting shifting patterns of light on his concentrated face. The vulnerability Marcus had seen in his office was still there, but layered now with a quiet, artistic absorption. It was captivating. Marcus hesitated. This was unprofessional. Crossing the client-attorney boundary outside the office was a line he never blurred. He should take his espresso and leave, but his feet betrayed him, carrying him towards the booth before his rational mind could intervene. Ethan's head snapped up, his sea-glass eyes wide with surprise, then a flicker of panic. He instinctively slammed the sketchbook shut. "Marcus, Mr. Thorne, I mean—" He flushed, scrambling to gather scattered charcoal sticks that had rolled across the table. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," Marcus admitted, feeling uncharacteristically awkward. He gestured vaguely with his espresso cup. "Just needed a break from the office fog. May I?" The question was out before he could stop. Ethan looked startled, then nodded quickly, shuffling papers and his sketchbook to make space. "Of course, please." His gaze darted nervously to the closed sketchbook. Marcus slid into the booth opposite him, the small space suddenly feeling incredibly intimate. The rain drummed harder outside. "Working on something?" he asked, nodding towards the sketchbook. Trying for a neutral tone, Ethan's flush deepened. "Just doodling. Helps me think. Or not think." He traced the edge of the sketchbook with a charcoal-smudged finger. "Sorry, it's probably silly." "Not at all," Marcus said, surprising himself. Again, creative outlets are important, especially when dealing with stress. He took a sip of his espresso, the bitterness grounding him. Speaking of which, Ben, my investigator, filed a preliminary report. Ethan's expression sobered instantly, the artist replaced by the anxious client. And? Marcus chose his words carefully, wanting to be honest, but not crush the fragile hope he'd seen ignite days before. Baytech has covered their tracks well so far. Riggs is careful. The digital trail on that termination letter is murky. Your colleagues, he sighed. They're scared. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He looked down at his hands, the calluses stark against the white formica table. I see. The words were heavy with resignation. So, it's my word against theirs. A giant corporation and a mechanic. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and intense. It's not just your word, Ethan. It's the pattern. The sudden shift. In your performance reviews after Riggs found out, that handwritten note, arrogant and stupid even if they claim it's standard. Ben's digging deeper. We're far from done. He met Ethan's gaze, willing him to believe. This is just the first skirmish, not the war. Ethan searched Marcus's face, looking for false reassurance. Finding none, a flicker of the earlier hope returned, tempered now by realism. Okay, he breathed. Okay. What do we do now? We keep pushing, Marcus stated firmly. Ben's looking into Riggs's personal life now. Sometimes pressure. Points exist outside the office, and we prepare. I need you to document everything. Every interaction you had with Riggs after the picnic. Dates, times, witnesses, what was said. Every slight, every changed deadline. He saw the exhaustion creep back into Ethan's eyes. I know it's painful, but it's ammunition. Ethan nodded, pulling out a small, battered notebook from his pocket. I've started, bits and pieces. He offered a weak smile. Leo, my boyfriend, he's been helping me remember. He's furious. The mention of Leo was like a dash of cold water. Boyfriend, of course. Marcus felt a ridiculous pang, quickly smothered by professional guilt. He had no business feeling anything but advocacy for this man. Good, he said, his voice slightly tighter than intended. Support is crucial. An awkward silence descended, filled only by the hiss of the espresso machine and the rain. Ethan fiddled with his empty mug. Marcus stared into the dregs of his espresso, searching for the right words, the professional distance that seemed to evaporate in this cramped, steamy booth. Suddenly, Ethan reached for his sketchbook again, hesitated, then slowly opened it. He flipped past a few pages filled with intricate mechanical sketches, gears, engine parts rendered with astonishing detail, then stopped. He turned the book around and slid it towards Marcus. It was a portrait. Not finished, but unmistakable. Marcus. Captured in sharp, bold charcoal strokes. The intensity in the eyes, the sharp line of the jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between the brows. It wasn't flattering in a conventional sense. It was raw, perceptive. It captured the power, the intelligence, but also a hint of the weariness Marcus felt deep in his bones. It was like looking into a mirror held up by someone who saw too much. Marcus froze, his breath caught. He was used to being analyzed, but never like this. Never with such intimate, unguarded observation. You drew this? He managed, his voice rough. Ethan looked mortified, snatching the sketchbook back. I'm sorry, it was just after our meeting. Your face, it stuck with me, the way you listened. Really listened. I shouldn't have. It's intrusive. I know. I'll destroy it. He started to tear the page. No! The word burst out sharper than Marcus intended. He reached out, his hand hovering over Ethan's, stopping the motion. Don't! Their fingers didn't touch, but the proximity sent. Another electric jolt through Marcus, mirroring the one in his office. He pulled his hand back, clearing his throat. It's remarkable. Truly. You have a gift. Ethan stared at him, confusion and something else, a dawning awareness warring in his eyes. The air crackled. The rain, the cafe sounds, everything faded. It was just the two of them, the unspoken tension thick enough to choke on. The line between lawyer and client, between protector and something else, felt perilously thin. A barista clattered dishes nearby, shattering the moment. Ethan flinched, quickly closing the sketchbook and shoving it into his worn canvas bag. I need to get going, he stammered, standing up abruptly. His elbow knocked over his empty mug. It clattered but didn't break. Marcus stood, too instinctively reaching out to steady it. Ethan, wait! Ethan paused, his bag clutched to his chest like a shield. His eyes met Marcus's, filled with a turmoil that mirrored Marcus's own. Confusion, fear, and a flicker of something. Dangerously close to longing. Yes? Marcus fought for professionalism. Monday, my office, 10 a.m. Bring everything you've documented. We'll strategize. Ethan nodded jerkily. Monday, 10 a.m. He turned and hurried towards the door, disappearing into the gray downpour, without looking back. Marcus stood alone by the booth, the overturned mug a small casualty on the table. The ghost of his own portrait seemed to linger in the air. Ben's frustrating report, the looming battle with Baytech, it all paled next to the seismic shift that had just occurred. He had walked into the cafe for coffee and a clear head. He'd walked out with his carefully ordered world tilted on its axis. He picked up the mug, writing it. The warmth of the espresso cup in his hand was nothing compared to the unsettling heat Ethan's presence, and that devastatingly perceptive sketch had ignited within him. The case was complicated enough. Now he had a far more dangerous complication. The terrifying realization that Ethan Reed wasn't just a client he believed in. He was becoming someone Marcus couldn't stop thinking about, someone who saw past the armor. The rain outside seemed to whisper a warning, but Marcus, staring at the spot where Ethan had sat, felt a treacherous warmth spread through him, defying the cold downpour and the perilous path ahead. Monday morning arrived with brittle sunshine doing little to dispel the chill in Marcus's office, or the awkwardness hanging heavy in the air. Ethan arrived precisely at 10, punctual and visibly nervous. He carried the same worn manila envelope and his battered notebook. Gone was the absorbed artist from the cafe. This was the anxious client, shoulders tense, eyes darting away whenever Marcus's gaze lingered a fraction too long. Ethan, Marcus greeted, gesturing him towards the chairs facing his desk. He kept his voice carefully neutral, the polished, lawyer firmly back in place. Please, sit. Did you have a chance to document more? Ethan nodded, sliding into the chair. He avoided Marcus's eyes, focusing intently on opening the envelope. Yes, some. It's hard, reliving it. He pulled out several handwritten pages filled with neat, precise script detailing incidents, snide remarks from rigs in meetings, exclusion from key project emails, fabricated errors on reports. The entries were clinical, but the tremor in Ethan's hand as he passed them over betrayed the raw pain beneath. Marcus took the pages, his fingers brushing Ethan's briefly. Both men flinched minutely. This is excellent, Ethan. Detailed, specific, exactly what we need. He began scanning the notes, forcing his mind onto the facts, the strategy. The sketch, his sketch, felt like a ghost haunting the room. Ben's, still digging into rigs. Nothing solid yet, but he's persistent. In the meantime, we build our narrative. This pattern of behavior is crucial. We need to establish a timeline. Link each incident directly to Riggs learning about your relationship. He spread the pages out, pointing. This entry here, where Riggs made the distraction comment in front of the team after the picnic, that's key. We need names of everyone present. Sarah Chen and Mike Rodriguez were definitely there, Ethan said, finally meeting Marcus's eyes. The sea glass hue was clouded with worry. But Mike transferred departments last month. Sarah, she seemed uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. We'll approach them carefully, Marcus assured him. Witness testimony is gold. Even if they're reluctant now, depositions have a way of focusing the mind. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Now, the financial angle. Baytech terminated you without cause, adding that discriminatory note. We'll be seeking significant damages for lost wages, emotional distress, punitive damages to punish them, and deter future behavior. Can you give me a clearer picture of your current financial situation? It helps quantify the hardship. Ethan's flush returned, creeping up his neck. He looked down, fiddling with the edge of the notebook. It's tight. Leo's covering most of the rent right now, but his job, it's not steady. He swallowed hard. I've been doing odd jobs, fixing friends' cars, anything mechanical, but it's pennies, savings, gone. His voice dropped to a near whisper. I had to borrow money last week. From Leo's brother. I hate it. Marcus felt a pang of protectiveness so sharp it stole his breath. The image of Ethan, skilled hands buried in an engine block for scraps, clashed violently with the corporate greed that had cast him aside. I understand, he said, his voice softer than he intended. This is precisely why the damages claim is vital. It's not just compensation, it's restoring what they stole. Before Marcus could elaborate, Helen's voice crackled over the intercom. Mr. Thorne, Ethan Reed's partner Leo is here. He says he needs to speak with Ethan urgently. Ethan's head snapped up, surprise and a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. Leo? He didn't say he was coming. Marcus masked his own sudden, irrational spike of irritation. Partner. Send him in, Helen. He kept his expression professionally neutral. The door opened and Leo strode in. He was handsome in a polished, slightly brash way. Early 30s, expensively casual clothes, dark hair, meticulously styled. He exuded a confident energy that immediately filled the room, his smile wide and practiced as his eyes landed on Ethan. Hey, babe. Sorry to barge in. You left your phone at home and I needed the keys for the storage unit. He walked straight to Ethan, bending to kiss his cheek possessively. Ethan stiffened almost imperceptibly. Leo straightened, turning his charm onto Marcus. You must be the famous Mr. Thorne, Leo Vance. He extended a hand. Ethan's told me all about you, so grateful you're taking this on. His grip was firm, his gaze assessing, sweeping over Marcus's office with open appraisal. Marcus Thorne, Marcus replied, shaking Leo's hand, his own grip deliberately firm and brief. He felt an immediate, visceral dislike. There was something performative about Leo's charm, a hardness beneath the surface. We were just discussing strategy. Strategy? Excellent, Leo said, pulling up another chair uninvited and sitting close to Ethan, draping an arm casually over the back of his chair. Ethan shifted slightly, his discomfort palpable now. So, how's it looking? When do we nail these bastards? To the wall? His tone was aggressive, lacking Ethan's quiet dignity. Marcus kept his gaze level. These things take time, Mr. Vance. We're building the case meticulously. Rushing could jeopardize it. Leo waved a dismissive hand. Time is money, Mr. Thorne. Ethan's struggling. We need results. He squeezed Ethan's shoulder. Right, babe? Ethan nodded mutely, staring at his hands. The vibrant man from the cafe, the passionate artist, had vanished, replaced by someone subdued, almost diminished, under Leo's presence. Marcus felt a cold fury simmer. Leo wasn't just impatient, he was dismissive of the process, of Ethan's emotional toll, focusing solely on the payout. The best results require a solid foundation, Marcus stated coolly. Rushing risks losing everything. Ethan understands that. He deliberately shifted his focus back to Ethan, excluding Leo. Ethan, the documentation you provided is crucial. Keep adding to it, every detail. Ben will be in touch if he finds anything substantial. Leo bristled slightly at being sidelined. Look, Mr. Thorne, he said, leaning forward, his charm slipping. I appreciate the caution, but Ethan needs reassurance. He needs to know this is moving. What's the next concrete step? Marcus met Leo's challenging gaze. The next concrete step, Mr. Vance, is for Ethan and me to continue our work without unnecessary pressure. I assure you, I am moving with all due speed and diligence. He stood, a clear dismissal. Ethan, we've covered the essentials for today. I'll contact you as soon as Ben has anything significant, or if we need to schedule depositions. Ethan stood quickly, relief and embarrassment warring on his face. Thank you, Marcus. I'll keep documenting. He gathered his papers, avoiding Leo's eyes. Leo stood too, his expression tight. He clearly wasn't used to being dismissed. Fine. Come on, Ethan. We've got things to do. He steered Ethan towards the door with a hand on the small of his back, a gesture that felt more controlling than affectionate. Marcus watched them go, the door clicking shut behind them. The air in the office felt charged, thick with the residue of Leo's abrasive energy and Ethan's palpable discomfort. The protective fury Marcus felt earlier solidified into cold determination. This case wasn't just about Baytech anymore. It was about the vulnerable man caught between a discriminatory corporation and a partner who seemed more like a demanding creditor than a source of support. He walked to the window, staring out at the city. Ethan's whispered confession echoed, I had to borrow money. I hate it. And Leo's aggressive push for a quick payout. A disturbing picture was forming. Was Leo part of the support system Ethan needed, or another source of pressure? The sketch, the quiet dignity in the cafe, the raw pain in his documentation. That was the real Ethan. The Ethan who seemed to shrink in Leo's presence. Marcus picked up the phone, dialing Ben's number with sharp, decisive jabs. Ben? Marcus, forget just Riggs for a moment. I need you to look into someone else. Leo Vance, Ethan Reed's partner. Financial background, employment history, anything relevant. Be discreet. Very discreet. He hung up, the weight of the case file now compounded by a new, deeply personal layer of concern. The battle lines were blurring. Fighting Baytech was one thing. Protecting Ethan from potential harm closer to home? That felt like stepping onto treacherous, uncharted ground. The image of Leo's possessive hand on Ethan's back lingered, fueling a resolve that went far beyond professional duty. He needed to win this case, not just for justice, but for the chance that the man with sea-glass eyes might find the freedom to breathe again. Ben's report on Leo Vance landed in Marcus's inbox like a live grenade late Wednesday afternoon. As Marcus scanned the findings, his initial dislike hardened into cold, sickening dread. Leo wasn't just impatient or brash. He was toxic. The financial background revealed a pattern, maxed-out credit cards in Leo's name, but several jointly held with Ethan were perilously close to their limits. Leo's not steady job. He worked sporadically as a freelance event photographer, often spending more on equipment and networking than he earned. More damningly, Ben had uncovered 2 prior small claims court cases against Leo from former roommates, disputes over unpaid rent and shared expenses. Leo had a history of leaning heavily on partners, bleeding them dry financially while maintaining a facade of effortless style. The most chilling detail was subtle. Ben had spoken to a former neighbor of Ethan and Leo's previous apartment. Heard shouting sometimes, the neighbor recalled. Not often, but sharp. That Leo guy had a temper. Saw the other one, Ethan, looking pretty down once, carrying groceries alone while Leo drove off in a flashy car. Marcus leaned back, pinching the bridge of his nose. Ethan wasn't just fighting Baytech. He was drowning in a relationship that mirrored the exploitation he faced at work. His whispered confession, "I hate it," echoed with new, horrifying resonance. The borrowed money wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a symptom of systemic control. He needed to see Ethan, not just about the Baytech case, but how. Summoning him to the office felt too formal, potentially alarming. The memory of the cafe offered a fragile solution, risky, unprofessional, but necessary. He texted Ethan directly, bypassing formal channels. "Need to update you on Baytech developments. Can you meet? The grind, 5 p.m.? Adding the cafe felt like throwing a lifeline to the place Ethan had seemed most like himself. The reply came quickly, laced with anxiety. "Leo's got a shoot tonight. I can be there. 5 p.m. Marcus arrived early, securing the same corner booth. The rain had returned, streaking the window like tears. When Ethan walked in, Marcus's breath hitched. He looked exhausted, shadows bruising the skin beneath his eyes. He carried tension in every line of his body, shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. His gaze darted nervously around the cafe before settling on Marcus. He offered a weak, strained smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus," Ethan said, sliding into the booth. He didn't remove his worn jacket. "Did Ben find something? About Baytech?" Hope warred with exhaustion in his voice. Marcus hesitated. He couldn't ambush him with Leo's report. Not yet. "Ben's still chasing leads on rigs," he said carefully, watching Ethan's face fall slightly. "But he confirmed the pattern you documented is consistent with discriminatory targeting. We're building a strong foundation." He paused, choosing his next words with extreme care. "Ethan, last time we met here, you mentioned financial strain, borrowing money. I need you to understand how critical that hardship is to our damages claim. But more importantly," he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Are you okay? Truly okay?" Ethan's eyes widened, then flickered away. He traced a knot in the wooden table. "It's hard. The job search isn't going well. And the bills," his voice trailed off. He looked physically smaller, diminished. "And Leo?" Marcus pressed gently, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Is he supportive? With the stress of all this?" Ethan flinched, as if struck. He stared at his hands, clenched on the tabletop. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, raw with shame. "He tries. He's frustrated. Thinks I should just get over it. Find any job. He doesn't understand why this case takes so long." He swallowed hard, his knuckles white. "Last night we argued. About the money I borrowed from his brother, he said I was a burden, that I wasn't trying hard enough." A single tear escaped, tracking silently down his cheek. He swiped at it angrily. "I am trying. I fix everything I can find." Marcus's blood ran cold. Burden. The word echoed Ben's report. He saw it then. The subtle bruise-like shadows weren't just from exhaustion. They were the marks of emotional erosion. "Ethan," Marcus said, his voice firm but laced with a warmth he couldn't suppress. "Listen to me. You are not a burden. What Baytech did to you was wrong. What you're fighting for is justice, and that takes time. And you deserve support, not pressure. You deserve to be with someone who sees your strength, not just—" He stopped himself, realizing how close he was to crossing an irrevocable line. Ethan looked up, his stormy eyes filled with a turmoil of pain, confusion, and a desperate, flickering need for belief. I feel so alone in this," he confessed, the admission cracking his voice. "Even with Leo, sometimes I feel more alone than when I'm actually by myself." The raw vulnerability shattered Marcus's remaining restraint. The professional wall crumbled. "You're not alone, Ethan," he said, the conviction ringing clear. "I'm here. For the case. And—" he took a breath, plunging into dangerous waters. "And as someone who cares what happens to you." Ethan stared at him, shock warring with something else, a dawning, terrified hope. "Marcus, He seemed lost for words, overwhelmed. Suddenly, Ethan's phone buzzed violently on the table. Leo flashed on the screen. Ethan jumped, his face paling. He fumbled to answer it. "Leo, I'm just finishing up with my lawyer." Marcus couldn't hear Leo's words, only the sharp, angry tone crackling through the phone. Ethan hunched further, his free hand rising instinctively as if to ward off a physical blow. "No, I didn't. It was just an update. I'll be home soon." His voice was small, pleading. "Please, Leo, not now." The call ended abruptly. Ethan lowered the phone, his hand trembling violently. He looked utterly broken, exposed in the harsh cafe light. I have to go," he whispered, scrambling to stand, his movements jerky with panic. His worn canvas bag slipped from his shoulder, spilling its contents onto the booth seat. Mechanical pencils, erasers, a wrench, and his sketchbook tumbled out. Marcus instinctively reached to help gather the items. As he picked up the sketchbook, it fell open, not to Marcus's portrait, but to a page filled with dark, chaotic charcoal, slashes, jagged lines, smudged shadows, a visceral depiction of anguish and trapped fury. It was heartbreaking. Ethan snatched the sketchbook back, his face flaming. "Please, I need to leave." He shoved everything haphazardly into his bag. "Ethan, wait." Marcus stood, blocking his path gently. He couldn't let him go back into that storm. Not like this. Every instinct screamed danger. "You don't have to go back there if you don't feel safe." Ethan froze, his eyes wide with fear and a desperate longing. "Where else would I go?" The question was a plea. Marcus made a decision that obliterated every professional boundary he'd ever upheld. "My place," he said, the words leaving his lips before he could second-guess them. "It's just a place. To breathe, no pressure, just safety. For tonight." He held Ethan's gaze, offering an anchor in the tempest. "Please." The rain lashed against the window. Ethan looked from Marcus's earnest face to the door, then back again. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion and a fragile, terrifying trust. His shoulders slumped. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Okay," he breathed, the word barely audible. "Just for tonight." Relief, profound and terrifying, flooded Marcus. He signaled for the check, his hand hovering near, but not touching, Ethan's arm as they walked towards the door. He hailed a cab under the downpour, shielding Ethan with his umbrella. As the cab pulled away from the curb, carrying them towards Marcus's rarely shared sanctuary, the weight of what he'd done settled heavily upon him. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He wasn't just Ethan's lawyer anymore. He was his refuge, and the battle lines had just irrevocably shifted, placing Ethan's fragile heart directly in his care while the storm raged ever closer. Marcus's apartment wasn't what Ethan expected. High ceilings, yes, and a view of the Bay Bridge glittering through the rain-streaked glass, but it felt sterile. Minimalist furniture in cool grays, abstract art that seemed more investment than passion, shelves lined with legal tomes and expensive untouched knickknacks. It spoke of success, control, and a profound loneliness that resonated deeply within Ethan's own hollowed-out state. Marcus hovered awkwardly near the entrance, shedding his coat. "Make yourself at home. Bathroom's down the hall to the right. Guest room, well, it's mostly storage, but the bed's made." He gestured vaguely towards a door. "Can I get you anything? Tea? Water?" Ethan stood frozen just inside the threshold, clutching his worn canvas bag like a life preserver. The enormity of where he was, why he was here, crashed over him. The argument with Leo, the humiliating phone call in the cafe, Marcus's unexpected offer. It felt surreal. "Water, please," he managed, his voice rough. Marcus nodded, disappearing into the sleek stainless steel kitchen. Ethan took tentative. Steps further in, his gaze landing on the only sign of disarray, a single half-empty tumbler of amber liquid beside a comfortable-looking armchair facing the view. The scent of expensive whiskey lingered faintly. Marcus returned with a glass of water. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending the now familiar jolt through both men. Ethan flinched back slightly, a reaction born of recent trauma rather than distaste. "Sorry," he murmured, taking a long sip. "Don't be," Marcus said softly. He gestured towards the living area. "Sit, please. You look exhausted." Ethan sank onto the edge of the pristine sofa, perching like a bird ready to flee. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken tension and the drumming rain. Marcus sat in the armchair opposite, maintaining a careful distance. How long have you lived here?" Ethan asked, grasping for neutral ground. 12 years, Marcus replied, his gaze sweeping the room with a hint of detachment. "Feels longer sometimes." He paused. "It's not much of a home, is it? More like a very expensive hotel room." The unexpected vulnerability in the admission startled Ethan. He looked around again, seeing the sterile perfection not as wealth, but as a carefully constructed cage. "It's peaceful," he offered honestly. "Quiet. After." He trailed off, unable to articulate the chaos of Leo's moods, the constant walking on eggshells. "After the shouting?" Marcus asked gently, his voice barely above the rain. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and shame. "How?" "Ben," Marcus admitted, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression earnest and devoid of judgment. "My investigator. When I saw how Leo treated you in my office, how he spoke to you on the phone, I asked Ben to look into him. I was worried, Ethan. I am worried." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes again, but this time they weren't born of humiliation alone. It was the staggering, terrifying realization that someone saw him. Someone cared enough to look beneath the surface. He wasn't always like this," Ethan whispered, the words tumbling out. "When we met, he was charming, exciting, but the money, his ambitions, my job loss, it changed him. The arguments got worse, the put-downs, making me feel small, useless, like I was broken." He swiped angrily at a tear. "And I believed him, because Baytech made me feel that way too." Marcus's jaw tightened. Seeing Ethan's pain, hearing the confirmation of Ben's findings, ignited a fierce, protective rage. "You are not broken, Ethan," he stated, his voice low and intense. "You are strong, resilient. You survived Baytech's cruelty, and you're surviving Leo's. You're fighting back. That takes incredible strength." He hesitated, then added, "And you are far from useless. Your talent—" He gestured towards Ethan's bag. "The sketches, they're extraordinary. You see the world in a way most people never will." Ethan looked down at his bag, then slowly, hesitantly, pulled out the sketchbook. He didn't open it, just held it tightly. "It's just escaping, when the noise gets too loud." "It's more than that," Marcus insisted. "It's truth. You captured—" He stopped, the memory of his own portrait vivid. "You see people, Ethan, really see them." Their eyes met across the space. The air crackled, thick with the weight of shared vulnerability, and the undeniable pull that had been building since their first meeting. The rain outside seemed to hush, holding its breath. Ethan's gaze flickered to Marcus's lips, then back to his eyes. A question, a terrifying possibility. Hanging in the charged silence, Marcus saw it. The flicker of awareness, the fragile hope mixed with fear. Every professional instinct screamed at him to retreat, to rebuild the wall. But looking at Ethan, bruised but unbroken, holding his pain and his talent like fragile gifts, the wall dissolved into dust. He stood, slowly, deliberately, crossing the small space that suddenly felt like an ocean. He didn't touch Ethan. He stopped a foot away, close enough for Ethan to feel the warmth radiating from him, to see the storm of conflict and longing in Marcus's own eyes. "Ethan," Marcus breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "What you feel right now, the fear, the uncertainty, it's valid. But so is this." He gestured between them. "This connection. It terrifies me, too. It breaks every rule I've ever lived by. But I can't pretend it's not there. Not anymore." Ethan stared up at him, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The sketchbook trembled in his hands. He didn't move away, he just waited. Watched. Marcus took the final step. He reached out, not to grasp, but to gently cup Ethan's face, his thumb brushing away the lingering dampness of a tear on his cheekbone. The touch was electric, searing through both of them. Ethan leaned into it, a soft, involuntary sigh escaping his lips, his eyes fluttering closed for a second. "I don't have all the answers," Marcus whispered, his thumb tracing the line of Ethan's jaw. "The case is messy. Leo is dangerous. My life is complicated. But I need you to know this. You are safe here. With me. Not just physically. Your heart. Your incredible, resilient heart. It's safe, too. I will protect it. I want to protect it. And not just as your lawyer." Ethan opened his eyes, the stormy sea glass now filled with a luminous, vulnerable light. He lifted his hand, covering Marcus's where it rested against his cheek. His touch was calloused, warm, grounding. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The trust, the answering pull, was written in every line of his face, in the way his body leaned towards Marcus's warmth. They stood there, suspended in the quiet sanctuary of the apartment, the city lights blurring through the rain outside. No kiss, not yet. Just the profound intimacy of touch, of shared understanding, of barriers finally crumbling. The sketchbook slipped forgotten onto the sofa as Ethan's other hand came up, tentatively resting on Marcus's chest, feeling the strong, rapid beat of his heart. Marcus lowered his forehead to rest gently against Ethan's. Their breaths mingled, warm and shaky. "Stay," Marcus murmured, the word a plea and a promise. "Just stay." Ethan nodded, a single, decisive movement. "I'm staying," he breathed. In that fragile, rain-hushed moment, amidst the wreckage of their old lives, something new and terrifyingly beautiful began. It wasn't the end of the storm. Leo still lurked. Baytech still loomed. But within the walls of Marcus's sterile apartment, a spark had ignited, a beacon of defiance, of hope, and of a love that refused to be silenced by fear or protocol. They had crossed the Rubicon, hand in trembling hand, and there was no turning back. Morning light, pale and tentative, filtered through Marcus's expansive windows, painting the sterile apartment in soft gold. Ethan stirred on the sofa, where he'd eventually fallen asleep, wrapped in a borrowed blanket that smelled faintly of Marcus, sandalwood and crisp linen. The profound intimacy of the night before, the touch, the shared breath, the unspoken promise, hung in the quiet air, both terrifying and exhilarating. Marcus was already up, silhouetted against the window, phone pressed to his ear. His posture radiated focused intensity. Ethan sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes just as Marcus turned, their gazes locked. No awkwardness, just a deep, quiet recognition that everything had changed. Marcus ended the call, a fierce light in his eyes. "That was Ben," Marcus said, his voice low and charged. He found it, the smoking gun. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat. "Riggs!" "Riggs," Marcus confirmed, striding closer. Ben tracked down a disgruntled former IT guy Baytech laid off last year. He accessed archived server logs, backups Riggs thought were purged. They prove Riggs himself added that handwritten slur to your termination letter 3 days after you signed the initial HR paperwork. He did it after hours, logged in from his office terminal. And Marcus paused, the triumph sharp. Ben found deleted emails, Riggs bragging to a buddy in another. Department about cleansing the team of distractions after he saw you with Leo at the picnic. He named you specifically. Relief, so profound it was almost painful, washed over Ethan. Tears sprang to his eyes, but they were tears of vindication. He did it. He really did it. He did, Marcus said, kneeling before the sofa, his hands resting, lightly on Ethan's knees. "It's over, Ethan. With this, Baytech won't risk a public trial. They'll settle. Big. And Riggs is finished." Before Ethan could fully process the victory, his phone buzzed insistently. Leo. The screen felt like ice in his hand. He looked at Marcus, fear warring with newfound resolve. "Answer it," Marcus said softly, his grip on Ethan's knees firming. An anchor. "On speaker. You're not alone." Ethan took a shaky breath and tapped the screen. "Leo?" "Where the fuck are you, Ethan?" Leo's voice was a venomous snarl, devoid of any charm. "You think you can just disappear after everything I've done for you? After loaning you money?" Ethan felt the familiar dread, the instinct to cower. But then he felt Marcus's steady presence, saw the unwavering belief in his eyes. He remembered his own strength, documented, page by painful page. "I'm safe, Leo," Ethan stated, his voice surprisingly steady. "And we need to talk." "Safe? With that fucking lawyer?" Leo spat. "You think he cares about you? He just wants his cut of the settlement. I'm your partner. I deserve that money after putting up with your pathetic whining." Marcus's eyes flashed dangerously, but he stayed silent, letting Ethan find his voice. "That money," Ethan said, each word gaining strength, "is for what Baytech did to me. For the job they stole, the dignity they tried to crush. It's not yours, Leo. It never was. And you—" His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed on. "You didn't support me. You belittled me. You made me feel like a burden, like I was broken. That's not partnership. That's abuse." Silence hissed on the other end. Then a low, dangerous laugh. "Abuse? Don't be dramatic. I pushed you because you needed it, because you're weak. And now you run to some rich asshole who's using you? Fine, stay there. But you'll regret this, Ethan. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell everyone how unstable you are, how you're screwing your lawyer for a payout. See who believes you then." The threat was ugly, designed to wound. Ethan flinched, but Marcus's hand covered his, warm and solid. "Mr. Vance," Marcus's voice cut through the line, cold and authoritative, the courtroom lion unleashed. "This conversation is being recorded. Any further attempts to harass, defame, or extort my client will result in immediate legal action, restraining orders, defamation suits. I have investigators documenting your financial pressures and your history of exploiting partners. Walk away, now, or face consequences far more severe than anything Ethan ever endured from you." The silence. This time was stunned. Leo had underestimated Marcus. Badly. You can't." "I can, and I will. Marcus stated implacably. Consider this your only warning. Any contact with Ethan henceforth goes through me. Goodbye, Mr. Vance. He nodded at Ethan. Ethan ended the call, his hand trembling, but a massive weight lifting from his chest. He looked at Marcus, tears spilling freely now. He's gone? He's gone, Marcus affirmed, pulling Ethan into a fierce embrace. He won't touch you again. I swear it. Ethan clung to him, burying his face in Marcus's shoulder, releasing months of pent-up fear and pain in shuddering sobs. Marcus held him tightly, murmuring reassurances, his own eyes suspiciously bright. The battle wasn't entirely over. The settlement negotiations, the legal disentanglement from Leo. But the monsters were cornered. 3 weeks later, the settlement was finalized. Baytech, faced with irrefutable proof of Riggs's discrimination and the PR nightmare it promised, capitulated. The sum was substantial, enough to erase Ethan's debts, secure his future, and fund the small mechanical workshop he dreamed of opening. Riggs was fired, his reputation in tatters. Ethan stood on the steps of Marcus's office building, the late afternoon sun warm on his face. He wore new clothes, simple but well-fitting, bought with his own money. The shadows under his eyes were fading. He held a single sheet of paper. The final settlement agreement. Marcus emerged, looking lighter than Ethan had ever seen him. The ice in his eyes had melted, replaced by a warmth reserved only for Ethan. It's done, Marcus said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Completely. Irrevocably. Ethan looked at the paper, then back at Marcus. The lawyer who became his champion, his protector, his safe harbor. The man who saw his strength when he felt broken, who believed him when no one else would. The man he'd fallen irrevocably in love with. It's done, Ethan echoed. He stepped closer, the city bustling around them, but in that moment, they were the only two people in the world. He reached up, cupping Marcus's face, mirroring the touch that had changed everything in the quiet apartment. But this? He gestured between them, his sea-glass eyes clear, calm, and filled with unwavering love. This is just beginning. Marcus leaned into his touch, his own hand covering Ethan's. The best case I never expected to take, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The verdict I never dared hope for. He closed the distance. Their lips met, not in a desperate collision, but in a slow, deep, affirming kiss. It was a promise, sealed under the open sky, a testament to survival, to justice found, and to a love forged in the fires of adversity. It was gentle, yet profound, tentative, yet certain. The weight of the past dissolved in the warmth of the present. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, Ethan rested his forehead against Marcus's. Where do we go from here? He whispered. Marcus smiled, a real, easy smile that transformed his face. Anywhere, he said. Everywhere. Home. Together. He took Ethan's hand, lacing their fingers tightly. First, I believe we have a sterile apartment that desperately needs some art on the walls. And maybe a drafting table? Ethan laughed, the sound bright and free, echoing the newfound lightness in his soul. He squeezed Marcus's hand. Lead the way, counselor. Hand in hand, they walked away from the imposing building, not as lawyer and client, but as partners, towards a future no longer defined by battles fought, but by a love won. The fog had lifted, replaced by the clear golden light of a verdict delivered, not by a jury, but by their own resilient hearts. And in Ethan's worn canvas bag, nestled, beside wrenches and pencils, his sketchbook lay open to a new page, ready to capture the beauty of what came next.